Today, I'm going to bring you along on one of the biggest and most arduous photo adventures I've ever been on, to the top of North America's highest peak, Denali. Well, hey everyone, it's Hudson. Welcome to this week's Approaching the Scene. If you hear traffic noise, it's because I'm on the porch of my house here in Portland, Oregon. My studio's across the way. And with our coronavirus shelter-in-place rules, I've just got enough cabin fever. I needed to get outside and have some nature around me and have a different background. And I'm sure a lot of you are feeling exactly the same thing. I hope that you, your families, your friends, your close ones are all safe wherever you happen to be. And I hope that maybe those of you who have a little more time because of shelter in place and businesses being shut down, maybe have a little more time to connect with family and friends, and that no one's suffering too much hardship right now. I know I'm spending more time with my kids, and that's precious at this age. And I want to give everyone a huge thanks for watching these videos, for helping me grow the channel, for liking, for subscribing. If you haven't subscribed yet, there's a little symbol down in the bottom right of the frame. You can always click to subscribe. So thanks so much to this whole community. A lot of us have been gathering during the pandemic on Tuesday mornings. I'm having these office hours every Tuesday morning at 10 a.m. Pacific time. They're completely free. We talk about a photographic topic. We do a ton of questions and answers. I often have friends other workshop leaders and other friends from the photographic community join me to take your questions and have a big group meeting with Zoom. So the sign up for that is www.hudsonhenry.com/office hours. I'm going to put a link to that in the video description. If you just go to the title of the video, click on it, scroll down, there's tons of links in there. I put timecode links to the different sections of the video. I put gear links, I put links to the office hours. But this last week we talked about mirrorless versus digital. My good friend David Archer, amazing wildlife photographer who's still sticking with DSLR, Nikon DSLRs right now, chimed in on that with me, took a lot of your questions. I talked about the reasons why I've moved to mirrorless. My good friend Rick LePage chimed in with some of his infinite Sony knowledge, and it was a great discussion. So this Tuesday, we're gonna be talking about carrying gear, traveling with gear, whether it's just into town to photograph your city or hopping on an international plane to go on a multi-day backpacking trip. I'll talk about my preferences for carrying gear in different situations as they exist in 2020. And I'll take your questions and comments, and maybe we can all learn from each other some tricks about carrying gear, as well as anything else you have questions about. So again, www.hudsonhenry.com/office hours. All right, so I'm sure that like me, most of you would really rather be out photographing this spring than holed up with the coronavirus. And one of the things that I've been doing in lieu of that is going back through some old images, re-editing things, taking myself on trips I've been on in the past. And one of those trips was just incredible. It stands out. It was this trip in 2013 where I was asked to help film, photograph, and do time-lapse for a feature-length film, documentary film about the first African-American team to take on Denali, America's highest mountain, formerly Mount McKinley, but the native name's Denali. And it was an incredible trip. Talk about arduous. We spent 30 days on the mountain. We hauled so much gear as a film crew. I made friends that have lasted, for the last 7 years and only gotten stronger. My studio mate, the filmmaker Andy Adkins, is the person who hired me, and then he moved from Montana to a house not so far from here and wound up sharing the studio space with me. My whole life has been enriched. I learned so much on that trip about stills, about video, about fluid heads versus ball heads, and I thought I would take you along on the trip, tell you some stories from it, show you some video stills and time lapse from it, and even put a link to the movie. If you want to watch the movie, it's easy. Go to www.anamericanascent.com, and I'll link that in the video description as well. So without too much further ado, let's head over to the studio, and I will take you to the top of Denali. All right, so let's go to High Alaska. I'm going to set the stage just really, really quick. My good friend Andy Adkins hit me up sort of into 2013, or into 2012, beginning of 2013, to see if I could be a part of this project, creating a documentary about the first all African American team to take on North America's highest mountain, Denali. It was a group that the National Outdoor Leadership School, NOLS, had put together to promote diversity awareness in the outdoors in 2013. And Andy'd heard about it. He's an Emmy Award-winning filmmaker and a great friend of mine. And here's a photo of me with less hair and less beard, but on my way. And he knew, you know, I had a bit of a climbing resume, going to the top of Kilimanjaro for elevation, and also climbing some pretty big mountains in South America, and some big mountains in the Alaska range and the Brooks Range. So a fair bit of time in Alaska, and he wanted to make sure that someone on the film crew could get to the top with the climbers. And I had not done much film work. I was more of a still photographer, but he liked my eye and he knew me well enough. He said, well, I can have you shooting the video that we need with your Nikon D810. And so they hired me, and right after my grandfather died, it was the perfect time for me to get out and get away from everything. My grandfather was a really huge figure in my life, Gil Henry, and I had about just a few weeks between his death and taking off on this trip, and it was the perfect thing for me to get out and forget about that loss, or not to digest that loss. You never forget about those things. But we took off, and Andy taught me during the course of 30 days on the mountain with he and his partner George Potter and another film crew member, Kyle Duba, pretty much everything I know about video production and sound production and time lapse, and my relationship with Andy grew really strong to the point where he shares a studio with me, and we do a lot of projects together, a lot of things that you see, really high video quality production in the field things with me, Andy helps me produce. When we got there, you know, they sort of showed me what settings to use with my Nikon D800, what lenses, how to use vibration reduction in filmmaking, sort of taught me a few tricks of the rope, and as we got gear organized and set up, I took off and did a whole lot of filming with Talkeetna Air Taxi. For a few days, I just ran in any empty seats that they had on glacier trips and sightseeing tours around the mountain, and I shot a lot of the footage that you'll see in the film that we produced, An American Ascent. You can always go to www.anamericanassent.com, and I'm putting a link to that in the YouTube description, but here's the website, and there's an easy to watch trailer, and there's places to stream it, or you can order DVDs. It's really a great film I'm really proud to have been a part of. But as we got ready to go out on the trip, I flew around the mountain, got to take lots of scenic views of the mountain. Here's the main map of the route climbing the west buttress of Denali. We were there to film this group of 9 climbers, not interfere with their experience, but document their journey and create a film from it. And my primary role was to get beautiful footage of them in spectacular locations and do natural scenics and time lapse and stills. When you fly in, you land at this sort of base camp, the Kahiltna Airport, they call it. Planes land on skis with the whole group and all of your gear. You spend a night here, and then you actually descend this thing called Heartbreak Hill. It's Heartbreak Hill on the way home because you have to climb the last bit back to the vehicle or to the plane. So you descend, I don't know, 500-600 feet, and you go this long 5-mile trip up the Kahiltna Glacier carrying everything with you. No cache and carry multiple legs of the trip. You carry everything, which for us as the film crew was a huge amount of gear. I'll show you a little preview of Andy with his gear. I think we each had about 100 pounds of gear between us, rigged in ways so that we could quickly be shooting. And you know, that first day going from the Kahiltna Airport all the way up to Camp 1 at 7,100 feet was just brutal. A long day. Here's one of the team, Billy, just after we got off the plane. Here's our film crew's first night camp. We had a couple of NOL guides that were assigned to come along with us and help us with, you know, cooking food and doing some camp tending and setup so that we could film round the clock while other people were setting up and cooking and doing all those things. So here's a nice tight camp with our big 4-person Hilleberg tents. When I got home, immediately started looking for a Hilleberg tent. If anybody has one of these, they're just the most amazing tent. I got a 3-person Hilleberg. They're light, they're bomb-proof, easy to set up. Here's George Potter and Andy with our big Sony camera that we carried all the way up to 14,000 foot peak, up to 14,000 foot camp and cached for the rest of the trip. And you can see we've got a Sackler fluid head that we brought along. We spent a lot of time figuring out what gear to bring. We could only really bring one tripod, one tripod head. A lot of the work was handheld. They were using Panasonic GH cameras. I had the Nikon D800. We used my tall Gitzo legs, were the lightest of all of our legs. They're the 79-inch legs that I carried previous to the newer version that I carry now, along with this fluid head. And in using a fluid head instead of a ball head in those 30 days on the mountain, that's where I became the complete fluid head convert. There was no way to go back to a ball head. I remember protesting that I needed to bring a ball head because I was so used to them on this trip. And in the wake of this journey, I could never be happy with a ball head again. Here's Tyree outside his camp. You know, one of our jobs was to just shoot. This is Steve Shobe. Here's Adina and Steve in a tent. It was to just kind of, you know, get stills and video of the crew living their life, climbing this mountain, telling their story. And also, you know, I was tasked with getting the scenic wonder. Here's a really beautiful, beautiful scene as we're getting ready to head from the Kahilton Airport down towards Mount Foraker and over to the 11,000 foot camp. Here we are gearing up for that big day's haul. We had some just beautiful cloud formations, and you could tell there was a lot of wind high up in these big mountains, and we were hoping it would calm down by the time we got up there. Again, carrying huge loads, you know, a lot on your back, a lot on a sled. Beautiful scenery on our way up. I remember our first dawn up there. Crossing the first of the big crevasses. You're constantly crossing crevasses on this trip. That's why there's so much rope here between Andy and I don't remember who that is in front of him, but you've got to have these huge amounts of rope between you and the next person so that if one of you falls in, you can stop their fall. You keep the rope taut. If they fall, you immediately stop and use your axe like an anchor and then build an anchor and get the rope on it and help that person up out of the crevasse with all the gear that they have on them. It was just beautiful up there. I remember just feeling how big this place was. So we did that long day. I remember feeling completely dead. And we cached some food for our trip home. We knew that we'd camp one night. The plan was to come down from 17,000 foot camp all the way to 7,800 foot camp in one day at the end of the trip. And we had a cache there of food and things we needed just to get out. And we left our skis there. We used skis as a film crew to just make it a little easier to get up to here. And then we switched to crampons and snowshoes. So that's the journey. There's the camp getting set up at 11,000 feet. We had this beautiful dawn the next morning. And I actually have a bit of time lapse I shot of that sunrise. I learned so much about making better quality time lapse on that trip, and I've applied it, you know, throughout my time lapse career after the fact. I learned so much from Andy and George about creating high quality time lapse. So let's see, moving on. What you do, I'm going to actually pull up another shot of this map. You do a single carry with all your gear from the airport to Camp 1. And then what you do all the way up the rest of the mountain is you climb almost to the next camp the next morning after arriving in your camp. You carry a sled, you carry a light pack, sled with a lot of stuff, and you climb up and you dig a big, deep hole. The hole has to be, gosh, I think it's 8 feet deep to meet park ranger certifications because ravens will dig your food out otherwise. And tear it up. So the caches have to be very deep. You dig, and then you travel back with empty sleds and packs and spend a night. Camp, cook dinner, spend a night. Break down camp, climb up to the next camp, set up camp, spend the night, climb back down, dig your cache up, put it back on your back, climb up, spend a night, take the cache up to the next, just below the next camp, dig a giant hole, cache it, come back down, stay the night, pack camp, climb to the next camp. So it's this arduous process of carrying a cache up, burying it, going back down, packing up camp, climbing up, setting up camp, getting your cache, coming back, doing it again. And that's sort of the big siege style climbing technique on a big mountain like this. I had never done it before. I'd always been alpine style with a small group moving light and fast when I was climbing. Here, we had 9 people in the film crew. I think there were 3 guides for them that were with them, more trained Knowles instructor guides, Robbie and Madhu and some others. And then we had our film crew where we had 4 people filming and 2 sort of Knowles people along with us helping facilitate our filmmaking. Anyhow, a beautiful location. And then traveling up to set that cache, this is Adina coming up with a sled on the rope team, and you can see our 7,800 foot camp down there on the glacier. I've never felt like I was in a bigger place. Here's the film crew, the second film rope team coming up behind me. Some just scenes from this big wild place out in the Alaska range. A lot of people always ask me what gear was I carrying. Well, I had my Nikon D800. I had a Tamron 24 to 75 millimeter lens that was lightweight, 2.8, nice and sharp. It was a lens I used at that time to kind of fill that normal range. I have my 14 to 24 big heavy 2.8 Nikon because I just love that lens and it's so wide angle. And then I had a 70 to 300 millimeter f4 or f4.5 variable aperture Nikon lens. I don't carry that lens anymore. It suffers quite a bit at the longer end, but it was light and it let me get these kinds of long shots like this 300 millimeter shot. Here's an image of us digging that cache. You just each take turns in the hole, digging a big cache to put all the stuff in. This is George Potter pointing out, some thoughts about the next film location with Andy. And that's the thing, is the film crew, you're not just hauling all this gear that you need to survive on the mountain and all your camera equipment in a way that you can pick it up and move fast, but you're also scouting and trying to figure out where you want to be for the next location and trying to be ahead of this team that's climbing as efficiently as they can. So if they're going to be leaving at 4 in the morning, you need to leave at 3 to get in position to film them when they go by that scenic spot that you saw when you were digging the cache the day before. And then you need to keep moving as fast as you can after they go by to catch up with them, pass them during a break, and get a second film location of them moving on the mountain. When you get in and everybody else is resting and taking their boots off, you need to be filming them resting and taking their boots off. Them setting up camp, all that kind of stuff. It was a real challenge physically and from a stamina standpoint to keep up that pace for all the weeks that we were on this mountain. Here's everybody, another one of those kind of wide scenic shots. This one's at 240 millimeters. So we'd set up a cache right up around here near the bend, and then came back, spent the night, packed up camp, and moved up to 11,000 feet. 11,000 feet, the mountain starts to have some more hazard. It's getting a little bit steeper. There's these big crevasses up above you. There's steep slopes that could potentially avalanche or send ice or rock fall down. There's actually crevasses within camp. You have to be careful moving around. But we had a really beautiful, beautiful day in there. It was a spectacular area. This is climbing up to set another cache up above. Here's Robbie leading his rope team. Looks like Shobe back behind him there, Stephen Shobe. Big Bergschrund crevasse. A Bergschrund's kind of the crevasse at the top of a glacier where it's breaking free of the mountain, pulling down. Here's an image that really showcases the difference. But you see a lot of images where the sun's in it and there are little circles or hexagons moving out. People say those are flares. Well, that's really ghosting. This is more of a flare where, because the intensity of the sunlight coming into this lower quality 70 to 300 millimeter lens from that era is just kind of overwhelming the optics. They get kind of a hazy look to them. Things aren't as optically clear because it's just being overwhelmed by the amount of light coming in, and it's just an overall kind of haze. It can be much worse than that too. Sometimes you'll see a hard line where it's just real hazy and kind of warm. Well, right now, Robbie's face is not sharp because of that ghosting. If I put him in a better position where the sun's a little more out of the frame, you can see how sharp that lens is capable of being. Same lens, same lighting conditions. Here's another photo I took. We had such beautiful weather at this camp. This is actually a 360-degree panorama. So it's all taken with a 14mm lens. It's a single row, but with the 14 mounted vertically and using that Sackler head, I quickly learned that a fluid head is so much better for doing panoramas than a ball head could ever dream of being. It was just amazing. You can see that this bag and these two people are the same as these two people in these bags. It's a 360-degree view where the top of the mountain's up here and the way we come from below is right here under the sun. And this image worked for a whole lot of purposes. This is a movie poster that we made out of it after it had won a number of awards at different festivals. And I also used it as, it was the cover of Sierra Magazine the summer after we got back. And it was the cover of a book called The Adventure Gap by James Mills, who wrote about this trip. You know, that's one of the great things with a pano is you can crop it however you want. So this is us climbing up above that 11,000-foot camp to set a cache up around. We intended to go up around this place called Windy Corner. This is sort of the edge of Windy Corner. Windy Corner is a really famous place on Denali on the West Buttress route because there's massive cliffs above, and it's a little sort of a ledge that there's a snow slope that's slanted that you can drag a sled around. The sled is hanging down below you, bouncing off the mountain as you go around it, and there's about a 2,000-foot cliff right below you. If there's a rock fall or an avalanche or anything that happens that makes you slip on Windy Corner, you're a goner. And we actually just sort of started around this bend. Our teams were going up, and a moment after I took this, a big bunch of rock came down. It was an unusually warm day, and this huge bunch of rock came bouncing down and rolled right between two of our rope teams. Around this bend is where it gets sketchy as you go over that shoulder. And we immediately stopped, came back to where we're standing right when I took this photo, dug our cache there instead of on the other side, and went back down to 11,000-foot camp. So instead of making it around and caching here, we cached here and went back down to camp, spent the night. Well, not really. We got up at 2 o'clock the next morning and packed up camp. And while it was cold and we didn't have to worry about rockfall or avalanche, we went around Windy Corner up to 14 camp. And then we did the same thing the next day at 2 a.m., wake up, coming back to dig up our cache and get it back up safely. So that was a kind of a crazy thing. Here we are in 14,000-foot camp, having accomplished that with a view of Mount Foraker and the moon back behind Rosemary Saul here. She's one of my favorite people I've ever met climbing. She's just such a fun character. So this is our camp at 14,000-foot camp, and you kind of think of 14 camp as this big party zone on Denali. It's this place where it's really sheltered from the storms and the winds. It's, you know, a trip up to 17,000-foot camp and then a push to the top. So it's this place where you wait for conditions to be right. You move up these fixed lines up a very steep slope, and then take the ridge up to the top. So you spend some time. At one point you run up and you cache the supplies you need for your summit bid on top of the ridge and then climb back down. But 14,000-foot camp is a big place where all the people who've made it hang out and wait for conditions to be right to go for the top. And it's a crazy, crazy place. I remember Stanford had a research team in there with helicopters bringing in supplies and things, and they were testing people's blood oxygen level the day that they got there, and then 2 days later. And if you tested your blood oxygen level and then ran 2 laps around base camp and tested it again, you could get a slice of pizza and a beer. It's that kind of crazy big community out there. Here's just a scenic view. I actually had to pee in the middle of the night. This is about midnight under the Alaskan sky, where it just never gets quite dark in summer. This is about as dark as it gets. And there's the moon and Mount Foraker and Mount Hunter, and this just gorgeous cloudscape. We put a time lapse. I shot a time lapse of this. I don't have it on my computer right now, but if you watch the film, you'll see it and you'll know it turned really red as I slept the last little bit before it came back to dawn. We got stuck up here. You know, this is one thing that happened. I'm going to show actually going to show some time lapse of things that were happening with the clouds in here. We got stuck here at 14,000 foot camp for, it seems like a week maybe, a very long time. And the reason we did was because there were such high winds aloft. You see these crazy lenticular clouds and clouds blowing over the top of Mount Foraker, and you know that it's blowing 100 miles an hour up on top of Denali and the other big peaks. Not a time to be up high on the mountain. Where you're at 14,000 foot camp, you're sheltered from that. You know, we were sitting there and it felt like balmy summer-like weather. It's, you know, it's just barely above freezing or even barely freezing, which in the sunshine and the snow can feel super, super warm. But there was a lot of wind blowing around, and we got stuck and burned a lot of the time that we had on the mountain and food that we had in reserve, sort of sitting there waiting for our time to be right to go for the summit. And one of the things that I had read about and I urged us to do if we had time, and because we were stuck there at 14,000 foot camp, we did have time, was go out to this place called the edge of the world. And it's part of that whole cliff system back towards Windy Corner where it drops a couple thousand feet and there's a little rock shelf there. And you can come to this precipice where you really truly feel like you're on the edge. We got out there and we set up some anchors and belayed people out. Here's Billy sitting right on the edge looking over that drop. My friend Adina, kind of a fun Sunstar shot. This is back before I had my Nikon 21.8 that I love so much for Sunstars, but the 14 to 24 doesn't make the world's worst Sunstar. Here's a little behind the scenes shot of Kyle Duba and Andy doing a little slider move. This ultra lightweight slider that we brought with us for the trip accidentally got left in a cache at 14,000 foot camp. So someday, if they haven't already, somebody's gonna dig up a nice ultra light slider at 14,000 feet on Denali. Anyhooch, we finally got the conditions that we needed to head up these fixed lines, up this steep wall from 14,000 foot onto the ridge that's known as the West Buttress, where you move on up that ridge to 17,000 foot camp. And there's some technical little bits around rocks with fixed lines set here and there by the Park Service. This is a handheld, I think 5-frame panoramic merger that I captured of us coming up the West Buttress. And then just moving along that ridge. Our film crew moved as fast as we could, got way out ahead, and arrived in 17,000 foot camp early enough that we could film the rest of the crew coming along the ridge and coming into camp and coming up the final slope into camp. I've got, here's the view from that 17,000 foot camp looking back down at the 14,000 foot camp below. You can see what a big group of tents it is down there. And I've got a little tiny clip from the film, kind of a teaser here, of Billy talking about that day going up the fixed lines and going on to 17,000 foot camp. I'll make sure you guys can hear it here.
Tough. I think we were on the fixed lines for 4 or 5 hours. Finally got to the top, and then we had another 6 hours to go to get to camp. Some of the steepest terrain we've had, definitely the most technical terrain, and the heaviest packs I've had on this trip.
Well, and that might be true for the crew, aside from those of us on the film crew who had to do that single day carry with everything. And then we left some of the heavy gear, like the Sony FSB camera that we could do slow motion work with, and the rail down here in 14,000 foot camp. We left a bit of our film weight, our big solar battery charging system. We had a flexible solar cell and a motorcycle battery and regulators and all kinds of things that we were carrying along with us. We left that stuff down there and took all the batteries with us. Anyhooch, we got up to 17,000 foot camp, and that is not a place you want to spend a lot of time. It's cold, it's exposed, it's not comfortably, sheltered from the elements like 14,000 foot camp. And you're up at an altitude where you just feel like your body is kind of slowly eating itself. You're not hungry, you're not comfortable, at all, sleeping. You don't feel like eating, and yet, you need more fuel up there. It's a rough place to be. You don't want to spend any more time than you need. So we spend a night, and then the first thing that you do is you head up this really steep snow slope. It switchbacks up it, called the Audubon. It's big, it's wide open. And it was a beautiful morning that we started up that. You get to the top of the Audubon, and it's a place called Denali Pass, and then you run this long ridge right up to a big flat place called the football field, and then up a short bit to the summit. So here we are at Denali Pass. It started out as a beautiful day, and weather just came blowing it out of nowhere. And we literally got whited out. It was snowing, and there was a bit of a debate about whether to continue on or whether to turn back and go back down to 17,000 foot camp. We didn't really have the supplies or the time or the energy to make multiple attempts on the summit. So after getting up the Audubon, calling it might be pretty much, if we're past this point at Denali Pass, the odds of making a second summit bid were really, really low. So it was a heated, tense debate up here at Denali Pass. And every now and then we'd see it kind of halfway clear. You'd see a little bit of blue. And we said, gosh, here we are at 18,000 feet. We're going up to 20. Maybe we'd climb right out of this just above. And so it finally was determined, maybe we'll continue on. And we came out as we headed up to some place called Zebra Rocks. You can see they're black and white here, another famous spot along the route. Adena right there. It's cold, it's blowing. There's definitely a storm right below us and on the edge. And it's a little nerve-wracking because you're going to have to descend back through it down that Audubon stretch to get to 17,000 foot camp again. But we pushed on, the weather held for us. We got up to the football field, and as we got up there, you see a little chain of people. When we got up there, they were moving up toward the summit. But unfortunately, in this photo, they're all running down toward us. We got up there, we got a snack, we checked on everybody, how they were feeling. We're filming the whole process, and all of a sudden this whiteout came in, and thunder and lightning hitting simultaneously all around us. My hair all started standing up. The metal in my ice axe was ringing and vibrating in my hand. We had an electrical storm at 20,000 feet. The summit of the mountain is literally, there's a little zigzag of people that's right there. It's just 3 short switchbacks away. It's maybe 300 feet above us. It almost feels like you could throw a snowball to it. And yet, all of a sudden, it feels as if you're going to be lucky to make it back down to camp. I swear there was just a constant fear of being struck by lightning. And it's a weird feeling because you're carrying this ice axe. Your ice axe in your hand is your absolute survival tool. It's the thing that if you fall, it's going to stop you from falling to your death. You use it as a brake. It's a tool that you use for everything in climbing. And in this moment, it's ringing in your hand. Every time that I had to stop because there were people on the way down, I would set my axe down and not have it in my hand. Anytime I could have it out of my hand, because you just felt like it was going to draw a lightning strike. So we were standing here. It took almost no time to determine, no, we need to go down. And I looked up, and everyone, no matter where they were on their journey up, had turned and were basically flocking back towards us. And one of the things that was interesting is right in front of us was a group that we'd been on the mountain with since the beginning, led by Conrad Anker and John Krakauer. And anybody who's familiar with climbing lore, John Krakauer wrote the seminal book Into Thin Air about the horrible accident that happened on Everest. And Conrad Anker is a world famous climber, long history, crazy, amazing hero of climbing lore. Those two guys came rushing back towards us without reaching the summit and said, "This shit is scary." And I was immediately like, whoa, when Conrad Anker tells you that it's scary, you need to get the hell out of there. So we turned tail and we headed down the mountain to 17,000 foot camp. And again, as a film crew, we had all we're doing is documenting the team's decision. They got so incredibly close. They went to 20,000 of 20,310 feet. But sadly, there wasn't enough food supplies or time. People had to get back to to the busy world. And so, you know, we took some still photos at 17,000 feet. Here's Andy and I. And then descended that long haul. We spent one night and descended from 17,000 feet to 7,800 foot camp in a single push. And then the next day down to the plains, and finally flew off the glacier. Here's Adina sitting across from me in the plane, flying home. And all I can say is that it was just an absolutely incredible adventure. I lost 30 pounds. It took nearly 2 bottles of conditioner to get my hair untangled after 30 days without a shower. And I was very happy to see my wife and home. But it's an amazing, amazing journey. And I learned so much photographically on that trip. I think, you know, you don't necessarily have to go climb the highest mountain in North America, but going out on a trip where for 30 days your sole focus is shooting and honing your skills will really push you into new dimensions photographically. Especially, you know, this trip I was learning filmmaking and time lapse, and I put so many of the lessons to use now that I learned on that trip. And I'm so thankful to Andy Adkins, George Potter at Distill Productions for bringing me along and hiring me to go on that trip, and to everybody involved with Expedition Denali for letting me be a part of this amazing thing. If you, again, want to check out the film, it's well worth watching. I'm really proud to be a part of it. It's won a number of Best Documentary Awards at different outdoor film festivals and African American film festivals. And it's a great story with a fun cast. And my friend Andy is an unparalleled documentary filmmaker and editor and director. And it was a joy to be a part of. Just go to anamericanassent.com. And again, I'll put that link in the YouTube description. All right, everybody, that about wraps that one up. It was an amazing trip. I hope you enjoyed. I hope you got a little something that you learned from. Remember, these Approaching the Scene videos are all about the community and driven by the things you want to know more about. So if you have questions, email them to me, put them in the YouTube comments. Sign up for the office hours on Tuesday, www.hudsonhenry.com/office hours. That link's in the video description again. You can add a question there that we'll tackle during the office hours. Thanks again so much for supporting the channel with your likes, with your shares, with subscribing. It means a lot to me, and I hope that you and all of yours are safe and sound through this whole weird period that we're going through as a world, and that we come out of it soon and we're back out photographing and creating new images and new memories and new adventures. Thanks again. See you next week.